Mom, Mom, I need you to wake up. The voice didn't belong in her dream. It was too sharp, too real. Sarah's head lolled against the airplane window, her hair falling across her face as the engine's steady hum wrapped around her like a blanket. She hadn't slept in almost 30 hours. Her body had shut down before her mind had a chance to argue. Mom! This time the voice was closer, firmer. Her eyelids fluttered open halfway, unfocused. The first thing she saw wasn't the sky outside. It was the dark navy sleeve, the gold stripes, the captain. He was standing over her, watching her. Before this story goes any further, take a second to subscribe because stories like this deserve to be heard. Sarah blinked, trying to pull herself back into the moment. Her neck ached, her throat was dry. Yes? She whispered. The captain didn't smile. Are you able to fly this aircraft? The question didn't make sense. Not at first. It hung in the air between them, heavy and strange, like a test she hadn't studied for. She frowned, still fogged with sleep. Sorry. What? Around them, passengers had gone quiet. A man across the aisle leaned forward slightly, his eyes fixed on the captain. The captain's expression didn't change. He studied her face, her clothes, her posture, everything about her, like he was trying to decide something. And in that moment, Sarah felt it, that familiar, sinking feeling. The one she'd spent her whole life trying to outrun. The feeling of being underestimated. Seat 7C had never meant anything special before. To Sarah, it was just a number printed on a boarding pass she'd almost missed. She'd run through the terminal barefoot, her sneakers in her hands, her lungs burning as the final boarding call echoed behind her. She'd made it with 2 minutes to spare. No time to breathe, no time to think. Just enough time to collapse into her seat and let her body give up. Now, as she sat there, half awake, with the captain staring down at her, she felt exposed, vulnerable. Are you able to fly this aircraft? He repeated. His tone wasn't loud, but it carried authority. It demanded an answer. Sarah swallowed. I don't understand. A flicker of something crossed his face. Impatience, maybe. You're in seat 7C, he said. She blinked again. Yes. He nodded slowly, like that confirmed something. Around them, the air felt tighter. The man across the aisle shifted in his seat, his jaw tightening as he watched. Sarah's fingers curled against the armrest. She became suddenly aware of how she looked, her wrinkled tank top, her bare arms, her messy hair. She hadn't dressed to impress anyone. She'd dressed to survive the day. The captain's eyes lingered on her for a moment longer. Then he sighed quietly. I need you to answer the question, Mom. There it was again. Mom. Formal. Cold. Sarah's heart began to beat faster. I am not a pilot, she said carefully. The captain didn't respond right away. He just kept looking at her, as if weighing her words against something he already believed. And that was when she realized. He hadn't asked the question because he expected her to say yes. Had asked because he didn't believe her answer would matter. A flush crept into her cheeks. Not embarrassment. Something else. Something older. Something heavier. The man across the aisle finally spoke. Is there a problem, officer? Officer, not captain. Sarah's head snapped slightly toward him. He was watching the uniform, not the stripes, but the badge clip near the captain's belt. The captain's jaw tightened. This doesn't concern you, sir. The man didn't back down. She's asleep. She's a passenger. You woke her up. His voice wasn't aggressive, but it wasn't passive either. It carried quiet conviction. Sarah felt something shift inside her. A small spark. The captain straightened. I am conducting a routine check. Routine. The word felt hollow. Sarah's fingers tightened on the armrest. She didn't feel like part of a routine. She felt like a suspect, like she'd done something wrong just by being there. The captain's gaze returned to her. I'll ask one more time, he said. And this time there was no mistaking the weight behind it. Are you able to fly this aircraft? Sarah stared at him, her mind racing, her chest tight. And somewhere deep inside her, a memory stirred. Of another uniform, another moment. Another time she'd been judged before she'd even spoken. She took a slow breath and answered. No, but the captain didn't move. The silence after she said it was worse than the question itself. No, it was a simple word, clear, honest, final. But the captain didn't step away. He didn't nod. He didn't apologize. He just stood there, looking down at her like Shed confirmed something disappointing. Sarah felt her throat tighten. The hum of the airplane engine seemed louder now, filling the space where his response should have been. Finally, he spoke. "Can I see your identification?" The words hit her harder than she expected. "Why?" she asked quietly. His expression didn't soften. "It's standard procedure. Standard." Another empty word. She hesitated. Her fingers instinctively moved toward her bag, then stopped. She'd done nothing wrong. Nothing. Around her, she could feel the eyes, watching, listening, judging. The man across the aisle spoke again. "She doesn't have to show you anything without a reason." The captain's head turned slowly toward him. His voice dropped. "Sir, I suggest you stay out of this." But the man didn't look away, and for the first time, Sarah saw something in the captain's face she hadn't seen before. Not authority, not confidence, something closer to irritation. Sarah reached into her bag, not because she believed she had to, but because she needed this moment to end. Her hands trembled slightly as she pulled out her wallet. She handed him her ID. He took it without thanking her. His eyes scanned it carefully. Too carefully! His brow furrowed. "Sarah Mitchell." He said her name like it was a question. "Yes." His eyes lifted to her face again. "You don't look like a pilot," the words landed softly, but they cut deep. She let out a quiet breath. "I told you, I am not." He held her ID a moment longer, then handed it back. But he didn't apologize, didn't explain, didn't acknowledge the humiliation hanging in the air between them. He simply nodded once, and turned to leave. As he walked away, Sarah felt something inside her shift. Not relief, not yet. Something else. A realization. This hadn't been about safety. It hadn't been about procedure. It had been about assumption. And assumption had a way of leaving scars you couldn't see. The man across the aisle leaned slightly toward her. "You okay?" She nodded automatically, but her voice didn't come out. She wasn't okay. Not really, because this wasn't new. This feeling, this moment, it was familiar. And familiarity made it worse. She leaned her head back against the window again, but she didn't close her eyes. She couldn't. Not anymore, because somewhere at the front of the plane, the captain was still thinking about her, and she could feel it. He should have let it go. That's what Sarah told herself as she stared out the oval window, watching the runway lights blur into long streaks of gold. The captain had walked away. He had her ID. He had his answer. It should have been over. But something in the air hadn't settled. You could feel it in the way the nearby passengers weren't talking, in the way the man across the aisle kept glancing toward the front of the plane, in the way Sarah's own body refused to relax. Her heart was still beating like she'd been running. She hated that feeling. Hated how one moment could drag you backward into years you thought you'd already survived. She closed her eyes, but rest didn't come. Instead, memory did. She was 22 again, standing outside a small flight school office in Arizona, holding a folder so tightly her fingers hurt. Inside that folder had been her acceptance letter. Her dream. Her way out. She remembered the front desk manager looking at her clothes back then, at her worn sneakers, her thrift store jeans, and saying, "Are you sure you're in the right place?" Not cruel, not loud, just certain she didn't belong. Shed smiled anyway. Shed learned to smile through those moments, but she hadn't lasted there. Not because she couldn't do it, because life had demanded something else. Her mother had gotten sick, bills had piled up, dreams had become luxuries she couldn't afford, and eventually, Shed let that version of herself go, or at least, she thought she had, until now. Until seat 7C, until that uniform had looked at her like she was either lying or pretending. The intercom cracked suddenly overhead, pulling her out of her thoughts. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking." His voice, calm, professional, untouched by what had just happened. "We'll be pushing back shortly. Flight time today will be approximately 2 hours and 18 minutes. Sarah felt something twist inside her chest. The normalcy of his voice felt almost unreal, like the moment between them had existed in a different world. Around her, passengers shifted, returning to their routines. Seatbelts clicked. Phones lit up. Conversations resumed. But Sarah didn't move. She couldn't stop thinking about the question. Not just what he asked, but how he asked it. Like she needed to prove something. Like her presence alone required explanation. The man across the aisle leaned toward her slightly again, his voice low. He was out of line, Sarah hesitated, then gave a small shrug. It happens. She hated how easy those words came out. It happens, like it was normal, like it was acceptable. The man frowned. That doesn't make it right. She looked at him for the first time fully. He was middle-aged, calm, steady, the kind of person who didn't speak just to hear himself talk. No, she said quietly. It doesn't. The plane began to move then, slowly pulling away from the gate. Sarah felt the vibration beneath her feet. Forward motion. Whether she was ready or not, she thought maybe that would be the end of it. That distance and time would bury the moment. But 10 minutes into the taxi, everything changed. The intercom crackled again. But this time, the voice wasn't calm. It wasn't steady. It was tighter, controlled but strained. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a minor situation up front. Please remain seated. Minor situation. The words didn't match the tone. Sarah's stomach dropped. She felt it before she understood it. That instinct, that shift in the air. The man across the aisle sat up straighter. Passengers looked around at each other. Questions without answers. Then she saw him, the captain. He stepped out of the cockpit. His face was different now. The confidence was thinner, the control more fragile. He walked down the aisle slowly, not like before, not with dominance, with purpose, with urgency. And then he stopped, right beside seat 7CA. Sarah's breath caught. He looked at her, really looked this time, not at her clothes, not at her hair, at her eyes. And when he spoke, his voice was no longer questioning her. It was asking for something else entirely. Miss Mitchell, he said quietly, I need to know the truth. Her pulse thundered in her ears. What truth? She whispered. He hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough for her to see it. The doubt, the vulnerability, the human being behind the uniform. Have you ever flown an aircraft? The world seemed to stop, the engines, the voices, the movement. Everything faded into that single moment, and Sarah realized something that would change everything that came next. This wasn't about suspicion anymore. This was about need, and for the first time since Shed boarded the plane, the power in the situation had shifted. But power, she knew, came with a cost, and she wasn't sure yet if she was ready to pay it. For a moment, Sarah didn't answer him, not because she didn't understand the question, but because she understood it too well, and understanding it meant accepting the weight behind it, the responsibility inside it, and the strange, almost unbearable irony of it. Just 20 minutes ago, this same man had stood over her like she was an inconvenience, like she was someone who needed to justify her existence in seat 7C, and now he was standing there asking her for truth, not to challenge her, but because he needed something only she might be able to give. She could see it in his face now, the thin cracks in the armor of authority, the quiet urgency he couldn't hide. Around them, passengers had begun to notice. Conversations faded, eyes locked onto the uniform, then onto her. She felt their attention like heat on her skin. Why are you asking me that? She said finally, her voice steady but low. The captain hesitated, and in that hesitation was something most people never saw in figures like him, humility trying to exist where pride had lived. My first officer, he said carefully. He's not able to continue right now. He didn't say unconscious. He didn't say medical emergency. He didn't need to. Sarah understood. She'd been around enough cockpits years ago to know what that meant. A commercial aircraft could be flown by one pilot, but it wasn't ideal. It wasn't safe long-term, especially not with systems, communications, and decisions stacking on top of each other. He needed someone who understood the language of the sky. He needed help. Sarah felt her hands grow colder in her lap. The old version of herself, the one Shed buried beneath hospital bills and late-night jobs and responsibilities that came too early in life, stirred painfully inside her chest. I trained, she admitted quietly. The words felt fragile after so many years of silence. His eyes sharpened. Trained how much? She swallowed. Private pilot, single engine, some simulator time beyond that. But that was years ago. I never finished commercial certification. Saying it out loud felt like confessing a dream she hadn't been allowed to keep. The captain studied her like her answer was oxygen, and he was deciding how much he could breathe. Do you understand cockpit instrumentation? He asked. Navigation displays. Radio procedures. She nodded slowly. Yes. The word barely left her lips before she felt fear rush in behind it. Not fear of flying, Fear of stepping back into a version of herself she'd been forced to abandon. Fear of failing. Fear of being seen again. The man across the aisle watched her, his expression no longer just concerned, but quietly supportive, like he understood this wasn't just about the plane. This was about something deeper, something personal. The captain exhaled, and for the first time since she'd met him, his voice carried something close to respect. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. The words stunned her. She hadn't expected them. "I made an assumption earlier," he continued. "I let appearance shape judgment. That was my mistake." The cabin was silent now. Every passenger close enough to hear held their breath. Sarah felt something shift inside her, something complicated. The apology didn't erase the sting. It didn't rewrite the moment, but it acknowledged it. And acknowledgement mattered. It meant he saw her now, not as a seat number, not as a disruption, as a person. "Right now," he said gently, "I need to ask you something else. Not as an officer, not as a captain, just as someone responsible for every life on this aircraft. Would you be willing to assist me?" The question landed differently than the first time. This time, it wasn't about authority. It was about trust, and trust was heavier. Sarah's mind raced. She thought about her mother, about sitting beside her hospital bed years ago, holding her hand as machines beeped softly, promising herself she would be strong no matter what life asked of her. She thought about all the moments she'd stayed small to survive, all the times she'd let the world convince her she wasn't enough because it was easier than fighting back. She thought about the version of herself who had once believed the sky was home, and she realized something important in that moment. Strength didn't disappear when dreams did. It waited, quietly, patiently. For the moment it was needed again. She looked up at him, really looked at him, not at the uniform, at the man. He wasn't perfect. He wasn't fearless. He was human, just like her. And for the first time since boarding the plane, she didn't feel small. She felt seen. She took a slow breath. "Tell me what you need," she said. And in that moment, the balance between them changed forever. The cockpit door closed behind her with a soft, final click, and Sarah felt the sound echo somewhere deeper than just her ears. It echoed in the version of herself she hadn't spoken to in years, the version that used to wake up before sunrise just to watch planes cut across the sky, believing there was a place for her up there. Now, she stood at the threshold of it again, older, quieter, carrying pieces of life she hadn't planted but still standing. The captain moved aside to give her space, not as an order, but as an invitation. That alone said more than his apology ever could. Inside the cockpit, the world felt different, smaller, focused, alive with purpose. Screens glowed with maps and numbers. Radios whispered distant voices. The captain explained the situation calmly, his tone no longer heavy with assumption, but balanced with trust. His first officer was conscious but unable to continue, slumped safely back in his seat, attended to and stable, but unavailable. The aircraft itself was steady, flying clean, flying true. It wasn't falling. It wasn't broken. It just needed two minds instead of one. And for the first time in years, Sarah let her mind return to that language. She didn't try to be someone she wasn't. She didn't pretend to know everything. She listened. She observed. She answered when she was sure. And when she wasn't, she said so. That, she remembered, was the first rule she'd ever learned. Confidence wasn't pretending to know. It was respecting what you didn't. Time moved differently in that cockpit. Minutes stretched and folded into moments of quiet concentration. Outside, the sky was endless blue, calm and forgiving. Inside, something even calmer began to grow inside her. Not pride, not yet. Something steadier. Self-recognition. The captain glanced at her once during a routine adjustment, and this time, there was no doubt in his eyes. Only gratitude, not because she was saving the day, but because she was standing beside him in it. Eventually, the runway appeared ahead of them, long and waiting. Air traffic control guided them. The captain handled the landing, his hands steady, his voice focused, but Sarah remained there, present, part of it, until the wheels touched the ground with a gentle, rolling certainty. The moment the aircraft slowed, a breath seemed to release from the entire world. Back in the cabin, passengers would never fully understand every detail, but they felt the outcome. They felt the safe arrival. They felt the invisible work of trust and second chances. When the engines powered down completely, silence filled the cockpit. The captain removed his headset slowly, then turned to her. For a second, neither of them spoke. Finally, he said quietly, "You didn't just assist. You reminded me of something I should have never forgotten." Sarah tilted her head slightly. He gave a small, human smile. That capability doesn't always look the way we expect it to. She didn't know how to respond to that, so she simply nodded, because some truths didn't need decoration. When she stepped back into the cabin, passengers looked at her differently, not because she had done something heroic, but because something about her presence had changed. The man across the aisle met her eyes and gave her a small nod. Not loud, not dramatic, just respect. She returned to seat 7C and sat down again. The same seat, the same window, but nothing inside her was the same. She realized then that the most powerful moments in life weren't the ones where you proved something to the world. They were the ones where you quietly proved something to yourself. She hadn't needed to finish becoming a commercial pilot to still be someone who understood the sky. She hadn't needed permission to still carry her strength. Life hadn't taken that from her. Life had simply waited until she was ready to see it again. Later, as passengers began to leave the aircraft, the captain stood near the front, thanking each person. When Sarah approached, he didn't offer a speech. He didn't offer ceremony. He simply said, "Thank you, Sarah." And this time, her name sounded the way it should have from the beginning. Like respect, like equality, like truth. She stepped out into the terminal, blending back into the ordinary world. No applause, no headlines, just another traveler moving forward. But inside her, something permanent had shifted. She understood now that resilience isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself, it waits. And when the moment comes, it rises quietly and reminds you of who you've always been. Sometimes the world will underestimate you. Sometimes people will see your clothes before they see your courage. Sometimes they'll question you before they understand you. But your worth was never defined by their first impression, only by what you carry when it matters most. And maybe that's the real lesson in all of this. Not that she helped fly a plane, but that she remembered she could still fly. And now, as this story comes to a close, I want to ask you something simple and human. From which part of the country are you watching this story?